have this other story in which several worlds are at war with each other, and one of the worlds is inhabited entirely by war machines, and some of the other worlds have magic that they use to fight back against that incredibly powerful force. And one day it kind of occurred to me as I was driving, I was like, oh, what would happen if the war machines actually got a hold of some of that magic? And then I immediately realized that it wouldn't be fair at all. And I came up with this line, and it's now kind of the first line of the book. It's a little bit different now, but the line at the time was, the human alliance knew the war was over when the war machine started using magic. And it made me laugh. And when I got home, I called my wife and I told her the line, and it made her laugh too. And then I started thinking about it, and it became this challenge of, what kind of a story could I write around this? How would you fight back against such a powerful force? And that's where the concept for Steal Fire from the Gods came from.
Yeah, I've always been a big reader. As a kid, I was reading fantasy, sci-fi, action, horror, if you consider Goosebumps horror. And I was also really big into comic books, mostly superhero comics. And that was something that I got into at a young age, and I stuck with through middle school, through high school, and into college, and now as an adult. Pretty much at all times, I'm reading one fiction book, one nonfiction book, and one comic book. And as a writer, it's a goal of mine to at some point put out either a comic book or a graphic novel, because that medium has meant so much to me for so long that, I want to make some type of a contribution to that format. My advice for new writers is always the same thing, and it's just to keep going. But it's also to ensure that you're enjoying the process of what you're doing. Publishing can be a very long, very slow road. But if you are enjoying the process of writing and coming up with stories and telling stories and developing stories, then not only are you going to have a lot more fun and much higher sort of life satisfaction, but you're also going to make better decisions because you're not going to be in such a rush to find an editor, find an agent, find a publishing house. Um, and even if those things do take a long time, you'll be okay with it because you're having so much fun telling stories. We have two cats. This is Vale, and her sister Ari looks just like her. So seeing one of them is just as good as seeing both of them. I don't know why she's so locked on the camera right now. It is fun as a writer to have pets because I spend a lot of time in my room by myself. I should not keep this take, but I'm going to keep this take because I think she's going to attack the phone. Um, yeah, it's nice to not be alone all the time while I'm home writing. But if you ever see a typo in one of my like blogs or newsletters or social media captions, just assume that it's probably because a cat walked across the keyboard.
I'm sure that it did, but I actually feel like faith played a bigger part in what happened after I was done writing the story. Up until that point, I'd always been the kind of writer who was very concerned with going to the right conference and saying the right things to the right people. And with Steel Fire, I mean, I was still sending the story out, but I stopped worrying so much and trying to force it so much. I did the things that I knew that I could do, that I knew were in my control, telling a good story and sending it to the right places, but I stopped trying to force the outcome so much. And that calmer approach obviously did a lot for my own sanity, but it also grew my faith a lot as I trusted God to do whatever he was going to do with Steel Fire from the Gods, even if that was nothing at all. And not long after that, I landed with Enclave Publishing, which of course was the best place for the story.
Because this is for Enclave, I feel like I should say Realm Makers, but that's kind of the easy answer. So instead, I'm going to say Dragon Con. Dragon Con is my hometown comic convention here in Atlanta. And I'm going to take one of my Air Mage units from Steelfire from the Gods because Dragon Con is spread out across 5 hotels and it's on Labor Day weekend. So it's really hot going between the different panels. But an Air Mage could just make the wind blow and keep me nice and cool. or even just lift me up off the ground and we could fly back and forth between the different hotels. As far as a costume, I am no fun. I never wear cosplay to conferences or conventions. So if you ever see me in costume at the Realm Makers Awards banquet, just know that I probably like lost a bet or something. This might be the most important thing for people to know about me. Now, when I'm writing, I'm usually pretty boring when it comes to writing fuel. I normally have a Yeti full of cold water and a cup of coffee. But if I am going to have a writing snack and I can choose whatever I want, I will absolutely always choose organic dried mango strips. I love them so much. The full name of the podcast is The Experience Conversations with Creatives. And it's just that it's very informal, free flowing conversations about creativity with people that I think are interesting. Obviously, I've had on lots of writers, but I've also had on actors, directors, composers, and much more. In terms of favorite episodes, I really do love all of the episodes for different reasons. But two that I do like to call out are Sarah Ella and Nadine Brandis, because although I've known each of them for several years now, in those conversations, I learned a lot of things about them that I didn't already know, and that was wonderful. Talking to my wife, whether it's a plot problem or a character problem or a world building problem, if she and I just like go for a walk or maybe go have dinner and I tell her about whatever the problem is, we can usually figure it out. And that's partly because she's the smartest person I've ever met. And she has a really good understanding of what it is that I need to do. But also, I think that just forcing yourself as a writer to articulate the issues that you're having is really valuable. Sometimes we're running up against a problem, but it's when it's still in our own heads and we haven't either written it down or spoken it out loud, we haven't fully conceptualized the issue. And so forcing yourself to put it into words, even if it's just in a journal or if you're telling somebody else, I think it really go a long way in helping you actually solve that problem. There were a lot of highlights at Realm Makers this year. I got to meet with the Enclave team, which was incredible. I got to see some friends that I only get to see usually once a year at Realm Makers. I got to moderate the book launch panel, which was awesome. But I want to point out one specific highlight, which was volunteering. And this is something that I always recommend to other writers when you're going to conferences or conventions. Consider volunteering, especially if you don't have a lot of things to do, if you don't have a lot of meetings or anything like that, because volunteering gives you a purpose and it can make the conference experience a lot more fun when you have something to do. And it also gives you sort of a reason to connect with other people, whether just other attendees or also some of the guests. So I've always loved volunteering. I've never regretted volunteering, that's for sure. And it is something that I always recommend that other people at least consider when you're signing up for a conference. Yeah, I think my answer is episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Uh, as a matter of fact, I'm of the belief that the prequel trilogy is every bit as good as the original trilogy. The score is obviously just as good because it's John Williams. Uh, the lightsaber choreography is much better in the prequels. Anakin's character arc is much more interesting than Luke's. And the prequels deal with themes of corruption and manipulation and what would you do for love. And finally, let's face it, Darth Maul is a much cooler villain than Darth Vader. There, I said it. In addition to being a writer, I'm also a musician. I can play keys a little bit. I can fake my way around strumming a guitar, but really I'm a bass guitarist. Uh, I've been playing since I was 18. I spent most of my 20s playing in rock bands, but now I mostly play for church. Uh, Music is a great sort of secondary creative outlet for me because a lot of times when I'm struggling with something, be it a plot problem or a character issue, or maybe just trying to figure out some world building, I feel like if I step aside and maybe just play music for a little while, it sort of exercises a different creative part of my brain. And sometimes I'll do it, but I'm still thinking about the story, but it's like I'm using a different part of my creativity. And it's amazing how often answers will then come to me that maybe I wouldn't have thought about if I was just continuing to sit there banging on my keyboard.
That question, and I feel like I should have some kind of brilliant response that tells you something unique about the character of Gunner. But the truth is, I'd probably just take him to go see Ed Sheeran because I actually saw Ed Sheeran here at Mercedes-Benz, and it was awesome. It can really be a difficult balance. I can resist. But it's really about prioritizing. You know, I'm a big scheduler. I'm a big to-do list maker. And I'm a big proponent of taking care of the big things first, right? So if you have your priorities in order, and a lot of times it helps actually write them down so that you can visualize whether your priorities are in order. And you take care of the big stuff. Make sure you're taking care of family time. Make sure you're taking care of your writing if that's, you know, your priority. And then it's kind of amazing how a lot of the other stuff tends to fall into place as long as you keep the main thing or maybe the main things the main thing. That is a tough question to answer without spoiling anything, but I'll try. The toughest part was matching Gunner's internal emotional character journey with what was happening to him sort of externally. And to solve that, I'm a big fan of whiteboarding. I have a huge double-sided whiteboard in my office, and I was drawing a lot of arcs in terms of sort of where he was in the story emotionally, whether he was at a high or at a low, and then also drawing what was happening to him and whether it was sort of good things or bad things. That's a really simplistic way of saying it, but in making sure that those reflected each other, or if they contrasted, that they were contrasting sort of on purpose and for a very specific reason. So yeah, that was the toughest part. My favorite hobby is basketball. When I'm not writing or working on a podcast or playing music or being a dad, I like to come out to my driveway and just shoot. It's a big part of my exercise routine, but it's also just something that's very calming for me. A lot of times when I'm playing basketball, I'm listening to a sermon or maybe a Christian meditation or even just listening to music and letting my mind just sort of wander. But it's something that means a lot to me. When I first started going to church, I only started going so that I could play for their basketball team, and God used that as a way to reach me, and there was a lot of relationships there that were changing my life. So it's something that's very important to me, and it's something that I'll do probably for the rest of my life. You're gonna have to trust me that that went in. One word. And if you've read the book, you probably already know what I'm going to say. Nico. Thank you for listening to this interview. I hope you'll check out my book, Steal Fire from the Gods, which releases on November 7th. It's about a 22-year-old wannabe mage fighting to survive in a world in which AI has discovered the secrets of elemental magic and used that power to overthrow humanity. The book blends elements of sci-fi and fantasy to create a fun, fast-paced, action-packed story that's also about a character
struggling with his own faith and asking God questions like, where are you and how could you possibly let this happen? I want to be sure that I thank the team at Enclave Publishing and Oasis Family Media for everything you've done. Everyone has been incredible to work with. The book is beautiful and the story is so much better because of all of the people who have contributed. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy my story.